we'll edit this out later, Jeff. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to Displaced, the second event of 16 in William Kohida and Jennifer Jolton's incredibly awesome and ambitious project, Month to Month, produced by More Art. I'm Larissa Reinhardt, the project coordinator at More Art, and we are so happy to have you here for Betty Yu and Sarah Quincer's event, Displaced. And I just wanted to welcome you and say hi. Please do sign up for our email list and keep in touch with us over social media. You too, live stream. Thank you.
Oh yeah, hi live stream. Is it on?
It's on. Hi. So with that, I'll give it over to you.
So thanks for coming. I feel like actually it's nice to be down here. I'm gonna sit over here. So I'm Betty, and basically I don't necessarily want to give a long bio of myself. I guess you can BettyU.net if you want to learn about the work I do. But basically, it's connecting social justice and art. And I started out as a filmmaker, documentary maker, and been doing a lot more interactive, interdisciplinary public art around a lot around housing displacement in Chinatown and throughout New York City, and also around police violence issues. And there's a lot of some very familiar faces who do awesome work too. And hopefully you guys will have a chance to get to know each other. But this event today is a very, I'm sure you all saw from the description that we're calling it Displaced, D-I-S placed, right? And the idea is to really put our whole selves into the space and into the conversations that we're going to have this evening. And I think, you know, the framing around this, I'm going to play a little podcast just to help frame the event, but we all sit with and have different experiences with gentrification and displacement, and it's obviously it's you know, we live in a world of dialectics where, you know, for instance, I live in Fort Greene, but I'm born and raised in Sunset Park, so my family is actually possibly being displaced, and I probably displaced a bunch of Caribbean working class families 15 years ago. So it's obviously really complicated, and we all understand that, right? That it's very complex, and to weigh out the race and class, you know, sort of issues always when it comes to gentrification and displacement. So the idea is not to like really like bring our own like guilt or like guilt on other people or blame or anything like that into the space, like really taking it away from the personal, but really situating ourselves within a system of especially in New York City now, right, where, you know, right now the real estate developers have really set out a plan for the next 15, 20 years, right, with whether it was is this mayor or, you know, obviously Mayor Bloomberg, who kicked it off with, you know, he passed 120 rezoning plans in just 12 years, and that's more than 8 of the mayors prior to him combined. And so if you think about that legacy that he left behind, there's only so much a mayor at this point or mayors after him can do. But this mayor, of course, is continuing that sort of anti-displacement and plan that has been put in place. So so what we'll do today is basically we're gonna have two. I think we'll have 2 story circles where we'll just very quickly tell our own stories with a prompt. And then we're going to then move into a sort of drawing activity together. And I have some examples to show, but where we call it Imagining Housing Justice, where there will be prompts along the way, but I won't review all of them. And then basically you'll have one full picture of what housing justice might look like in the ideal. And we'll do this as a group, so it's like kind of a group think exercise and group mapping, community mapping exercise. But I thought maybe we could just really quickly introduce ourselves, like our name and maybe what neighborhood we're from, however you want to define where you're from, actually, because it can be very different for everyone. So just those 2 things, and then we can kind of get started. So I'm Betty, and I'm from Sunset Park, but I now reside in Fort Greene, Clinton Hill.
Great. My name's Renee. I'm from Sydney originally, and this is my neighborhood.
I'm Jess. I'm from Long Island, but I live in Ridgewood with Jeff.
My name is Baba, and I'm from Soho, New York, and I've recently re-infiltrated.
My name is Doug. I was raised in New Jersey, but I live in Bushwick.
My name is Kate. I am from Columbia Heights, Washington, D.C., and I currently live in Bushwick.
Hi, I'm William. I'm originally from upstate New York near Saratoga and live in Bushwick now. Lived here since 2008.
I'm Jeff. I grew up on Long Island. Family's from Brooklyn and Queens historically, and now I live in Richmond.
And my name is Catherine, and I'm from Ireland, and I live in the East Village.
I'm Jen. I am from California, and I live in Williamsburg.
I'm Eileen, and I'm a native New Yorker. Grew up in the Bronx, and I live right now in the financial district, Lower Manhattan Seaport area.
Oh, sure. Hi, I'm Johanna. I'm from Westchester. I'm currently living in Flushing, Queens.
I'm Sarah. I'm from Jackson Heights, Queens. I live in Bushwick, Brooklyn.
I'm Larissa. I'm from Ohio, and I live in the East Village.
I'm Anna. I grew up in Tribeca and then on Long Island, and I live in Bourne Hill now.
Hi, I'm Sergio. I am from Mexico City. I live in Los Angeles
Nice
now.
to have you. Long way.
Just for this specific event.
I'm Michaela. I'm originally from Italy, and I live in the financial district.
And then before we get into it, as you can see there's some butcher paper on the walls, but I don't know, Sarah, if you wanted to say a few sentences, introduce yourself.
Yeah, right.
Sarah's an awesome artist,
So yeah, I do art and activism and like especially visual arts and also the written arts and stuff. And yeah, and I do have definitely a specific focus on housing. It's definitely a personal thing for me. And you'll probably hear about that more in the story circles, but yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So we'll be sort of tag teaming a little bit, and each of us will be facilitating the story circle. So we have two people that just joined us, and as they settle, we're just gonna basically let out sort of, and I think everyone either here has been sort of in these kind of community spaces or facilitated even. I'm sure there's a lot of experienced folks here, but just so that we are kind of we're sort of seeing things from the same perspective and have the same assumptions of what gentrification is and certain definitions, and also community agreements. And so what community agreements are obviously are just things that in this space for the next hour and a half that we can agree to as a group when we speak and when we have our discussions together. And so I actually can't see what they are.
I can read
so
them.
And then if
The
folks have
marker.
questions or additions or want to emphasize anything, but we're just going to speak through this.
Yeah, the marker's kind of late, so I'll just read. Avoid assumptions, speak from the I. In other words, try not to generalize about other people's experience. One mic, like one person talking at a time. Step up, step back. So that's like, if you don't usually talk that much or you don't feel like you get to be heard that much, then you can step up. If you feel that you often have a chance to be heard, then you can step back a little bit. Avoid jargon, and be aware of intentions, but also the impacts. So sometimes, we may mean to say one thing, but it impacts in a different way, so then we try to, address that. So that's basically it. Yeah.
Great. So it's pretty cut dry, I guess, but I don't know if anyone wants to emphasize anything. I would, avoid jargon, because I think, I don't know, depending on how comfortable people are with maybe housing language or even activist language, sometimes we tend to just speak it in a, like, someone could speak an issue like you're from Mars, right? If you use certain lingo that other folks are just not used to. So we just want to break down that jargon and break down acronyms when possible. And just always really, speak from the I perspective and not assume just because someone looks a certain way that they're, that they have a certain lived experience, for instance. So kind of avoiding those assumptions, especially when we're talking about displacement and gentrification. Obviously, it's a very sensitive issue. So is that cool? Is that like a thumbs up? Kind of? Cool. And I don't know if the folks that just got here, I don't know if you want to, there's folks, I don't know if you want to just say your name. We'll just say our name and what neighborhood we're from.
I'd first like to apologize. It just took so much longer, so I didn't mean to be disrespectful.
No, not at all.
My name is Janine James, and I live in Chelsea.
Okay,
So,
thanks. Yeah. So if you guys can take, if you can take one and pass it, and this is all not, so basically Sarah and myself, we kind of compile this, and the first two definitions of gentrification we borrow from Equality for Flatbush, which is a group in Flatbush fighting gentrification, a Black-led organization fighting gentrification out there, covering East New York, of course, which is the first neighborhood that's being rezoned this summer under de Blasio, and then also from Ultra Red, which is an artist activist group out in Los Angeles. And there's just some resources on the other side. This is borrowed from also Equality for Flatbush, I think, which is just a little check sheet about 20 facts about that Brooklyn tenants should know. So it's just something that you can just kind of take back, just kind of just built off of what other people have put out. So I think what we can start with maybe is really placing ourselves in, when we talk about gentrification, what do we actually mean? And do we, we could obviously have a long intellectual discussion breaking this down, but that if we can agree that these are sort of the general framework we're working from when we talk about gentrification. So when we go into our sort of story circles, we're going into that discussion, into the story circles with sort of this definition in mind. So I don't know if somebody wants to just maybe read, because I think it might be really hard to read from there. Somebody want to just read the first paragraph? So these two definitions right here. Anybody want to volunteer? Okay, thank you. Can you say please your name and what neighborhood?
Hi, I'm Martin Montoya. I live actually in Ridgewood.
Okay, great.
And here is Janine.
Great, thanks.
Who's my great friend. And
thank you for volunteering to read.
Absolutely. Definition of gentrification. We were having a little conversation on the way here about this. Gentrification is displacement and replacement of people for profit. The process of gentrification occurs when private and public agencies like planning committees, the police, developers, employ policies like eminent domain, tax subsidies, etc., to develop a neighborhood for profit. Gentrification disproportionately impacts communities of color. The displacement of communities of color is part of an ongoing legacy of cultural imperialism and neo-colonialism.
And that's a very strong statement, of course. And so we could obviously spend lots of time, but I think the again, really just taking our own individual sort of blame or blaming others out of it and really looking at within the global context, as we know, where displacement and real estate trumps all of our own individual acts of awareness and that kind of thing when it comes to housing. And then the second definition, I don't know if somebody else wants to read it or we can have you read it again, but this comes again from a local organization in Brooklyn here, Equality for Flatbush.
I'll read it.
Great, thanks.
Gentrification is a concerted and deliberate effort to price out of low to middle income residents from neighborhoods by city government, corporations, real estate developers, and greedy landlords in favor of renting, selling, and catering to people of higher and or more flexible incomes. We know from first-hand experience that the same unscrupulous property owners who use tactics to force long-time older tenants of color out of their rent-stabilized apartments will turn around and illegally overcharge incoming younger white tenants for the same apartment. For this very reason, we believe that all of us long-time and new residents, communities of color and white communities, low-income and middle-class people have a stake in the urgent struggle to save affordable housing, in this case in Brooklyn, from the Equality for Flatbush grassroots community organization.
Great, thanks. And so the second definition obviously is more comprehensive in terms of encompassing our own role in it and the this inclusion of of communities of color, historically marginalized folks, and white communities also having a stake in helping to preserve. And this can be a very controversial statement because I think often it's not just about race, it's obviously about class too, and I think some of that will probably come out in the stories. But these are just two very similar but also kind of different. I don't know if folks want to reflect on them at all, but it's just to kind of just put it out there. We don't need to, but it's just to sort of put these out there as working definitions for us here in this space. And then before we get into the story circles, I just wanted to play a really short podcast from, I don't know if folks have been have heard of the There Goes the Neighborhood, which is a new podcast, yeah, on WNYC, which is really good. And this is more, this is more the, this is the, I guess the promo for it, which is only a few minutes, but it just gives a good context for us, and it seems like a lot of you have been hearing it, and it's free to obviously download it. It's pretty good. So if you can just press play on that 5-minute one.
Every Tuesday morning.
It's the right one. Take it to yeah, it's really good.
You know what's interesting? The other day I was walking in my neighborhood and I saw a black elderly gentleman that I hadn't seen in a couple months, and he literally, his eyes flew open and he said, "You're still here." And I went, "Yeah, and you're still here. Things have changed, haven't they?" And we were like, "Yeah, black folks are disappearing."
I'm not ready to sell. I ain't ready to sell yet, and I need them to leave me alone.
Flyers, stuffed in the mailbox. As soon as I see "we buy houses," I throw it right in the garbage.
Real estate, that's like the only way out of poverty to reach real wealth.
When he bought it, there was still 1 or 2 tenants living in the building. Our agreement on the lease was that I will get it completely vacant, and that's how I got it.
I live in Bed-Stuy. I moved there 4 years ago with lots of other white people. And as a white person, I don't know what my white privilege is. That's part of it, right? It's ignorance. It's about not knowing the benefits that I have because I'm white.
And this neighborhood, I was in there 72.5 years, and I love the neighborhood, the people, and the stinkers. I love it all, and I'm not going nowhere. You can't go anywhere. I ain't going nowhere. I'm not going nowhere.
Gentrification is obviously a very hot potato type of word.
There goes the neighborhood.
There goes the neighborhood.
There goes the neighborhood.
You know what we really mean when we talk about gentrification? Money. And when the people who handle that money they loan or money they spend to put up buildings or money they move around to broker deals, when they try to give you an idea of how much is in play right now, they use words like tsunami and tidal wave. I'm Kai Wright. I'm an editor at The Nation magazine, and I'm partnering with my colleagues at WNYC to try and understand this moment. And there are a range of opinions on what's happening.
What we don't talk about actually is race. Racism and systemic racism. My understanding is that that's what gentrification is when a neighborhood becomes valuable. And what makes that valuable is when white people decide that they want to live there. Or when wealth comes to the neighborhood. And most of the time, the people who have the wealth.
I mean, because it changes from neighborhood to neighborhood and block to block. So, gentrification is a systemic phenomenon driven by global capital, and it has its own characteristic in every single block, in every single apartment building, in every single city.
And to me, gentrification right now in New York City, to me, that's inevitable. But it doesn't mean it will always be, and it doesn't mean that it can't be changed or adjusted or tempered by community activism and by political decision-making.
That was Rebecca Carroll, D.W. Gibson, and Jim O'Grady. And as you can see, there's a lot to talk about. And we're going to try to cover it all over the next several weeks because this process is radically reshaping the city. In Brooklyn, which has always been a place where striving migrants from around the world could put down roots and claw their way toward the middle class, rents in some neighborhoods here have doubled and tripled in recent years. But it's not just here. Oakland is now the 5th most expensive rental market in the country. And as Rebecca pointed out, it's not just about real estate. There's something happening in so many Black and Latino neighborhoods. As the national economy has inched its way through a recovery, young professionals with money to spend and the developers who cater to them have revived their interest in cities, where people who are still struggling are feeling what can only be described as a push. So, here in New York, Mayor Bill de Blasio, a progressive Democrat who rode into office on the back of outrage over inequality, he says he has a plan for controlling all of this change. A way to build more affordable housing without displacing people in the process. Well, maybe, but people are deeply suspicious. And we're going to try to understand why. Even the most optimistic real estate pros, and we have talked to them, didn't see gentrification moving so quickly across central Brooklyn. And neither did the waves of suddenly priced out residents. We've talked to them too.
So you can, so that's just their promo they did, like before the whole series. But it's really great. They've been focusing on East New York for the first few episodes, I think. And as again, East New York is the targeted community that will be rezoned. And I don't have to tell you guys, probably know. I mean, their affordable housing is like $30,000 more than the average median income of anyone who lives in East New York. The median income there is, I believe, anywhere from like $20,000 to $25,000 for an average family, and even to qualify for affordable housing in one of the buildings, you have to make at least 60 or 70, 65, I think. So that's what affordable is, right? And so we see that as his plan that 15 rezonings will be unveiled over the next 4 years, basically. And he hasn't unveiled all of them. We know there's 4, right? The 5 at least we know of, and it's because he wants to prevent organizing, obviously, I think. And as progressive as we think he is, this is his legacy he's leaving us. But anyway, so we're going to sort of pivot and now sort of kind of break up into 2 groups. And what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about the prompts here. And the idea is just to this is a really good way for us to get to know each other in this space, and also our own relationship, which can be very complicated, to displacement and housing. And of course you have to say all of that in 2 minutes. But the idea is that there's not like, it's not a performance. It's not like you have to, say the right thing or there's a wrong thing. There's like whatever you say is the story that is right for the moment, and so there's no wrong story here at all. But the point of it is really for you to, if you can sort of have a beginning, middle, and end, or just try to and you may find that you change your story after hearing someone else speak, right? But the prompts are share a story you think the mayor needs to hear about housing. The second prompt, and you can just pick one of these, or if none of them appeal to you, you can talk about anything related to housing. Second prompt is share a story about housing displacement you have experienced in New York City. And then the final one is share a story, share a story about belonging or not belonging in a neighborhood. And this is just to kind of spark some thinking around this. And the story circle, which obviously is a long tradition that comes out of the South, and I know Junebug Productions, some of you know, but then there's another group which I'm forgetting, the Southern Theater. Anyway, it's a group in the South. It's an African American theater company in the South that actually really coined this particular story circle model, which is just really some standard things which seem really obvious, but no interruptions, no like cross talking. It's really about completely being present in the moment of what that person's saying. So if you're like, oh yeah, I totally been there before. Oh, I totally know. Try not to cross talk. And then after each story, we sort of just take a minute, not literally a minute, but about 10 seconds to really reflect on what the person's saying, and then we move on to the next person. And because of time, we really hope folks will honor the 2 minutes. If you need a little bit more just to wrap up your story, that's fine. And I hope everyone's okay with having them. We have this little Zoom recorder here, so I guess they'll be sort of audio recorded. But I do want to say, if this is okay, that if some people don't, sometimes it affects what you say if you're being recorded. So out of respect, if you don't want to be recorded, maybe we can stop it.
You can just press the little button.
Yeah, and then keep going after. Yeah. So just because I know that has been a factor in the past. But we'll do that, and then what we're going to do is do a little debrief, and then we're going to move from our sort of rooted in our stories and our collective story, reflect on that, and then move on to the next activity. Yeah.
So should we like count off to form?
I'm thinking, yeah, we could count off, or we could literally divide the room in half.
I have one question.
Yes.
In the 2 minutes, are we going through all 3 prompts?
Oh no, sorry. Okay. So basically, just pick one that really
pick one that's like
that really kind of appeals to you, okay. And then I forgot to say that the person who's facilitating. So in this case, I am facilitating, and so is Sarah. Will start the story. We'll tell their story. I don't know if we have time because maybe one of us can tell our story as a model. I don't know if that would be helpful, or we could just do it in a small circle.
And in the interest of not having too much of a noise conflict, it's possible we may want to have one group
Oh, yeah.
put on their jackets and step outside or something. I mean, we can try it, but I feel like in this room, it might be intense, so we could experiment, I think.
Is there anyone who does not want to go outside? Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's pretty nice out, right? So maybe we should count off from just the twos, and then the ones can stay in here, the twos go outside or something.
Okay, that's
So we can count off, and I don't know, you guys are participating?
I'm not.
Okay, okay. So we can start. Hi, do you want to introduce yourselves real quick? Just the two that just came in? Just name and neighborhood that you're from, or that you live in.
Cynthia, I'm from Bushwick. I walked over. I live about 5 minutes away.
I'm Vincent. I'm her son. I'm also from Bushwick, and I walked over.
That's great. Cool. Thanks for coming. So do you want to count off 1 and 2? So maybe you'll be 1, and then.
Am I one?
Yes.
Can I'm not completely sure what I want to say yet.
No worries. And so I forgot to say, the last thing is if you want to pass, you can pass, and then we'll come back to you. And if you're drawing a blank, that's fine. So it's not like we're going to force anyone to tell a story. But hopefully you'll be moved by hearing other people.
Right.
Cool. So you're 1, and then 2, and then 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1,
2.
2. Oh, you're 1?
I'm documenting.
You're 1, so you're 1.
Okay. 1, and then I'm 2.
2, and then you're 1, and then you're.
Oh no, I'm.
Okay, so you're 1. You're 1. Okay. So, do you want to go inside or outside, Sarah? I don't care. I have no preference.
I don't care.
Is it cold? Is it cold out? Or
No, it's
outside.
I'm excited to go.
So, okay, so the ones. Who are the ones?
Oh,
No.
Do you guys have a preference inside, outside?
She said twos go out.
Inside.
Twos go out.
Somebody expressed a vocal preference.
Everyone has a vocal preference. Okay, twos go out.
They yelled first.
And then we'll meet. So twos go outside, and one of us will meet you out there, and then.
So I think twos are going outside.
And then and we're gonna keep time on this so that we don't go way over. And I'm gonna get switched. So we'll do 2. Oh yes. Let's see. This is hummus. Oh, I know. Yeah.
Those are all the same, right?
Oh yeah, these are all the same. Yeah, you start this one. You just keep that one.
Take them all.
Thank you. So the folks outside, I'm gonna put my jacket on.
Also, please feel free to refresh your beverages before you go into the first.
Oh, yes. And then there's all the other stuff there. Okay,
I'm laughing at anything that was born in the South that has no cross cupping. I like want to experience that. Cheese. I like cheese. You're born with the cross cupping DA.
It's really adventure. That's all.
It's just all part of how Southerners roll when they tell stories. I understand that. I am too much. It's like Southern.
Yeah, there's some group
Yeah, I know
that.
it's also got more communication works in collaboration with them to help teach them.
Yeah, it's an academic organization, and I was corrected because I thought it was a Jumbo Productions.
Right, which is
actually.
yeah, I'm interested to see
I need no help with this. So it's always good on. I was like, my Okay, so I'm gonna go outside, and you guys are in here. So that would be great. I'm excited to see hopefully we'll move this by the That's okay. Either way is okay. Okay, so the folks who are outside.
Probably more often than we can,
There are bells.
so let's all circle when you're ready.
I think we're gonna take a few more people. There seems to be a lot of people in here. 10. We have 5 out there, and we have 10 in here.
I stayed in here because my friends are in here.
Oh, okay. Anybody want to join us outside? Maybe.
I'll go.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
Probably one more person.
Thanks. There's nothing in notes, okay? Okay, cool.
So I guess I'm gonna start and like model a story a little bit, which is gonna be completely coming off the top of my tired brain, but that's cool. So I'm gonna give myself 2 minutes, and then I'm gonna give everybody else 2 minutes as well. And afterwards, like, there's not a lot of talk really, but then after everybody goes, then we can talk for like 10 minutes about everything that we heard. So Friday, here goes. Start. Okay, so what can I say about myself? I actually feel like the belonging and not belonging thing might be the best overall theme for me. And so I grew up in Jackson Heights, Queens, which I don't know how many people have been there, but it's funny because I'm white, right? So it's like real, like people sometimes are surprised and but like I did grow up there, and I do think that growing up in a neighborhood that had so many different immigrant populations from like, it was literally like the UN, you know, just like walking down the street. I think that definitely affects a person's mindset or point of view in a very different way than if you grew up in a suburban area that was much more like segregated. So yeah, so I grew up there, and then I kind of, you know, finished high school, bounced around the boroughs, and ended up in Bushwick, which is actually, for me, when I got there, it kind of reminded me of Jackson Heights. You have like the elevated train, and there's a lot of different immigrants from different countries, and, you know, kind of working class neighborhood, little icy carts on the street and all that stuff. And so, but yet at the same time, I wasn't from there, right? And I still haven't even gotten around to learning Spanish. So, you know, there's clear differences and barriers. So, but anyway, I've been in that apartment for like 7 years now, and it's like a run down apartment. I have roommates and stuff, you know, a broke artist life, whatever. And a couple of years ago, the landlord jacked up the rent dramatically by like 30%, like all at once. And since we're not rent stabilized tenants, there was nothing we could do except pay it or get out. So we started paying more, and it's become clear at this point that he really wants to get rid of all the long-term tenants, which I guess we aren't counting as that too. But oh wow, that was quick. Anyway, so the upshot of the story is the looming threat of displacement and like what to do about that. So wow, that went by so quick. So I guess you guys got a taste of what it's like to try to talk about these things in 2 minutes. So I'm gonna start for you, or you.
You. All right.
Okay. All right.
2 minutes.
Let's go on.
I think sort of trying to decide which one, but I think it's the idea of like a story I think the mayor should hear. And you know, I have a friend who moved here from LA and was looking at potentially maybe trying to buy a place, and I had some sort of self-interest. You know, he might have been able to rent an apartment to my wife and I, because we're living in a place where the rent went up about 30% in 1 year all at once, because our apartment also used to be rent stabilized and is no longer rent stabilized. But we went and we were looking at a couple of buildings out here in Bushwick, and we were met at one building by like 3 very well, kind of aggressive real estate agents, and they were explaining that the apartment, the building, you know, was for sale for about 1.2 million, and that they were talking about the fact that they had 4 NYU students downstairs who were paying like close to like $6,000 a month in rent, and that I'm like, that doesn't sound legal. And then they were like, this apartment here, if you don't want to live here right away, we could get, you know, $3,800 tomorrow for this apartment. And it kind of blew my mind what, you know, the mindset of the real estate agents were, and what they were asking, and what they, you know, what the rents were on the market, you know, and it just, you know, scared me, you know, thinking if you know, we're in our apartment at our landlord's kind of generosity, you know, if he decides he wants to raise the rent, you know, more, you know, we won't be able to afford to stay there. But we're so far below market at this point that it's, I don't know, I forget. And yeah, and I mean, you know, just like
the first experience when we, before we moved to Bushwick, probably back in like 2005 or 2006.
I'm so sorry. Finish
I will,
your
no,
thought.
well, I just, you know,
Finish your thought.
we looked at some apartments kind of near the Morgan stop, and the landlord who was renting the building out wouldn't even show us the apartments because we didn't bring our third, you know, our roommate with us, and he's like, we're just in the process of moving everyone out of this building and opening these apartments up, and we need to know that you're basically all white. And I was like, that's housing discrimination. How's that even, you know, again, not legal, you know? Small stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, you ready for me to press the timer? Okay,
Sure.
starting.
So mine would probably be sharing a story of belonging or not belonging in a neighborhood. So I moved to Bushwick probably about three years ago. At the time I was working nights and entrusted my roommate to find whatever apartment that was in our pricing range. Thus that's how we ended up. Kind of like how we ended up in Bushwick, not really paying attention, or me myself not really paying attention.
I'm so sorry, I'm gonna turn that off and I'll give you 10 seconds.
That's alright.
Oh, that's totally.
So no, that's
Okay, you know what? I'll start yours.
yeah.
It never happens. I'm sorry. It never happens. How did that happen?
Okay, so let's see. Let me give you like 30 seconds extra.
Sure.
Or whatever. I'll just start at 2 minutes again. Like,
That's alright.
it's easier.
So before I moved to Bushwick, I was living in Crown Heights, and we were looking for someplace cheaper, which ended up being here in Bushwick. So we moved in, and like he told me like we found this place, whatever. It was him, my roommate, and another. So it was three of us. I was like, alright, cool. We move in. It wasn't until I actually started exploring the neighborhood after we moved in that I realized how much of a Spanish-speaking community that we were in, and just kind of walking around and like, you know, trying to familiarize myself with the neighborhood. It almost was like a sense of not belonging, because like you realize like how many families are living in some of these very small or crammed apartments just around the vicinity. And then eventually it was just like more and more like restaurants or coffee shops, what have you, was just being built in the neighborhood, and it just felt like, and that's when my understanding of actual gentrification, and I started actually understanding what it was really all about and like how it was affecting these other communities with these other shops and everything that was opening up in the neighborhood that was catering more so towards transplants or white people coming into that neighborhood. And then just understanding or just learning about people's rent, or just seeing every other building being renovated for whatever new tenants moving in. And it was just a very kind of like enlightening type of moment of understanding of like that I'm also part of like the wave of the gentrification of the neighborhood moving in. And it was just yeah, I don't know. It's just all very for it. It's just incredible, almost like in a sad way, of what's like happening.
My turn.
Yes.
Okay. So I moved to Harlem probably about 7 or 8 years ago at this point. I lived there for about 3 years before I moved to Queens and then Ridgewood. And at the time I was moving with 3 of my good friends, and their parents were paying their rent, so it was affordable for them. But for me, it was kind of just all me, so I was like, okay, this is still kind of pricey, like how about further up? But that was it, that's where we're going. And I didn't realize at the fact how much I was a gentrifier, right, in that time, because I was moving into a building that reasonably, like on the surface, for people who look like me, born into the body that I was born in, is affordable, cheap, right? But I guess my story is more so about not belonging. I think I felt that way probably for just about 3 weeks, and I was like, well shit, like, I could be friends with people in my neighborhood, and I could learn more about culture and community. So it's kind of like this contradiction of like, yes, I recognize the privilege that I have, right, because of who I am and things that I can't change. But at the same time, there's kind of like this bond and this relationship that was built between having to choose to like ride the metro or buy a sandwich for lunch or you know, this, that, and the other thing. So I think it's, for me, feeling those things and like being aware of those feelings and then doing kind of what we're doing right now and talking about it and talking about how to move past it and recognize the difference, but recognize that like we all have a stake in it. It's not just like somebody has the upper hand and that's it, because in some ways I've learned that everybody can kind of have the upper hand when you're working together with people. I don't know, it's just really interesting to have that experience. So young too, at the time I was 17, right? So looking back now, 25, going on 26, I think like what would I have done differently? But,
yeah, I think mine is just a similar story of belonging or not belonging, and coming to Brooklyn when I was wanting to be here. You know, I specifically chose Brooklyn for the melting pot of different cultures, and you know, we were in the neighborhood we were in for 3 years, which was down in like Williamsburg, but south, and to see it change and everything that we moved to America to have envelopers slowly disappear. And you know, to Jess's point, were we part of that? You know, how can we be more aware of our community and to be a positive influence and impact? And you know, and so that really was something that enlightened my husband and myself to basically be, you know, how do we leave our neighborhood better than what we find it? Are we taking out our earpods when we walk the dog and saying good afternoon to the old lady who lives next door, and like slowing down to have a chat? Because when we moved to Bushwick, we didn't feel that. I didn't feel necessarily welcome. You know, with my accent, a lot of people had trouble understanding me. Similar things like trying to learn Spanish and whatnot, you know, that's a definite goal. But yeah, just, you know, now to be able to walk around the neighborhood and see some of those people have left, that makes me sad. But the ones who were there actually, you know, really happy to see people like us still in the neighborhood. If you care about the place you're in, you know, what can you do to sort of make yourself welcome as well.
So yeah, start you off with fresh students. Okay, there you go.
I think that I'm gonna go with the belonging and not belonging. My dad's family is from East New York. They're Jews, and we lived kind of in and out of the city when I was growing up, and neither of my parents live in New York City anymore. And I've had a very tenuous relationship with the city because of my family's history and just divorce and kind of just the idea of what I knew of our family and then what it is now. And I am in a place, a unique place now. I mean, definitely, I don't know how to do this, how to live here sustainably in my life, but what I am coming into a new place about is when I'm with my parents, if they come and visit me or store, you know, when I'm with them here, I sort of ask them to, like, I'll show them my life and sort of what I am doing in the city now, and will often overlap with their own stories of being in New York, growing up, having their memories of when I was little or my brother was little with them, and it's true, it's like the highlights, the seminary that is in Chelsea. My mom used to like push my brother in his stroller in like the cloister, which is now like intelligentsia coffee and like a hotel, and she can't believe it. And it just, you know, we come at these places in such different points, but they are, it's just it's a new kind of entry into understanding my family's history in this city, and it's just giving me a lot to think about in terms of what I want out of
living in New York and how to do it in different times in your life.
Excellent.
Yes. Southerner town story in 2 minutes. It's not going to
It's really just a taste.
So I live in Chelsea, and I absolutely love Chelsea. I've lived there 14 and a half years, and I've never felt like I belonged anywhere like I feel in Chelsea. I love everything that it stands for in terms of diversity and the eclectic architecture and all of that, so I won't go too deep, but it's my hood and I love it. I don't love what's happening there now, and I've had a few wake-up calls of recent that I'm not awake enough to it because it's so natural for me to be in the element of Chelsea that is very diverse. But I had an event last night that I don't know what it all means yet exactly, except that it reminded me that I belong and that I need to be sure I'm part of everybody still belonging. It was about 1 o'clock at night, and I was with a friend, and we were walking down 10th Avenue, and we were at 26th Street. I don't even think about the affordable housing as projects or anything. I'll go through there, and I don't usually, but I'll walk through there and hang out and have lunch. And I heard a woman screaming and freaking out and whatever, and of course you notice and you look, and we could try to figure out what's going on, and we saw her pug had escaped off the leash or was something, and it was trying to dart in and out of the street. And I have a pug, so I was like freaking out, and I have some behavioral training experience, not that you never know that from my pug, and I was like, without knowing it, without thinking about it, I was just spot over there, and she was screaming in a panic. The dog was panicked as a result. She's like, go home, go home, go home. So the dog ran into the projects, and she ran.
I'm gonna give you time because you have an exciting story.
So she
no
ran.
shades. I'm just saying, there's like.
So she ran into the projects. Clearly, that was where she lives, and she goes in, and the dog was panicking into the projects, and she's like running, like, I'm gonna kill you when I get you, and get over there, and this man. I'm like, I've been there, but I know you're supposed to act like it's platform fun. So I walked up to her and said, I have some dog training experience, can I help? And I have a pug, can I help you? She's like, oh my God, yes, please, please. So we chased the dog into the project. At 1 o'clock in the morning, and the dog and pugs have this way of looking like they're gonna be cool with you, and then they dart off again. And I know that. So I was like, let's have some fun, come on. And so the dog ran us all through these projects, and she's chasing me, I'm chasing her. And I'm like, I'm like, calm down. If you can't calm down, you just need to stay here to the owner. And she's like, yes, ma'am, okay. And I hear somebody out of the window going, she's in charge. She knows what she's doing. Let her do it. So then the dog runs up to this walkway, and I think I've got him. And out opens this door, like to me, they would, there was like, in my naive way, it's like a group of like gangsters, right? Like open the door, and they're like, what's going on over here? What's happening? This dog runs past them, and they start chasing the dog, and they think it's funny. So the dog chases into the hallway, and I'm like, don't say a word. Everybody just stay silent or act playful. So they all start dancing like they're all playful. The dog runs into an open apartment door, and they're like getting high, I don't know, whatever. You can smoke pot, but I don't care. And the dog is like, runs up on the sofa, and like, whose dog is this? And runs out, and I'm like, he comes right here, like, come on, let's play, let's have some fun, come. It lets me get it, and it darts off again. It goes outside to these two, you could go left or right. By now, everybody's outside the windows, people are up on their segways, so people are like segwaying, trying to figure it all out. They're like, and you're like, let her get it, she's gonna get it. So I was with my friend, I'm like, you block that entranceway, you block that entranceway. The owner of the dog is back there like crying, and we get the dog. We scoop it up, and we got it. We're holding it. And everybody was like in the windows, you got it. Like, it was like, was that dog gonna bite you? I don't want to come near it. It was gonna bite. It turned into this like whole, like you could never have planned it off of Seinfeld or anything. It just turned into like a 1:30 in the morning like episode of everybody who was just in their life in that moment. somehow came out of it, and they were all part of the story of getting this dog, right? And the owner comes over and says, how do I think you enough? And how do I think you enough? You know, I'm like, well, don't scold it. Just be nice, be real sweet, like it did a hero's journey. And she's like, well, I can't. I'm too freaked out. Can you put the leash on? And can you walk it home for me? So I walk her home and walk the dog home. And, you know, things calm down, and we walk out and we leave. And it just all felt very natural, and I didn't think anything of it. It could have been, you know, I just came from North Carolina, visiting my family. Could have been there, could have been anywhere. When we get home, it was Joey, and he looks at me. I look at him, notice he's like, you know, froze. He's like, girl, that was a freak out. Like, did you realize where we were? Like, I mean, I was like sitting there going, what's going on? Oh my God, people are like looking at us like we were crazy. And he was like very reacted to it. Like, we were up in the projects at 1:30 in the morning. I'm like, you need to get your act together, Joey. He's moved out of New York. I was like, to me, that was just a moment in time that just happened, and everybody was into it and all part of it. And it was just this kind of weird juxtaposition of realities. But mostly for me, it almost was like it happened before it was over. And it just made me feel like I love my neighborhood, I'm comfortable in my neighborhood, and maybe we ought to get more pugs. And more wild pugs need to escape. Yeah, to be part of it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go back to the structure.
Sure. I'm Martine, and I moved to, I call it the Kingdom of Far Bushwick.
Oh, yeah.
Because I live right practically on the border with Bed-Stuy and Bushwick and Queens, and I live in Ridgewood, just right, but I take the L train across Brooklyn, and I celebrate Brooklyn, and I love Brooklyn. And after living in the city for 10 years, I was done with the city, and I wanted to go and experience. I love culture, and I'm sharing a story belonging in my neighborhood. I moved out to Ridgewood 3.5 years ago, and I love it. I'm in love with it because I love Serbians, I love Bosnians, I love Fresh Pond Road, I love the Polish, and I speak Spanish, and I just love everything about it. Working class, middle class families, and on Halloween, all the kids are running on Myrtle Avenue with their parents, and you can hear 5 different languages, and I thrive in that. I celebrate cultures of the world and all of their pros and their cons, everything about them. And I love where I live, but I also want to contribute to my community and make it a safe, equitable place for all to inhabit, and that's all I have to say about that. That's why I'm here, for all the neighborhoods.
So did everybody who wanted to, did you want to?
No, I'm good.
Does anybody want to speak who didn't get to speak? Okay, cool. So I don't know if they might cut us off sooner, but supposedly we have 10 minutes. So like if they're strict, we only have a few minutes. But I'm gonna say let's act like we have 10 minutes and just people want to throw out responses or thoughts, digestion of everything that was just heard. Yeah.
I want to respond to your comment. What was your name again?
Martine.
Martine.
Yeah.
It's funny. Just in your body language, when you're talking about Ridgewood, I live in Ridgewood now too. This October will be 2 years. I'm not sure if it's because I live with my best friend in the entire world, Jen, in a little corner, or if it's because our apartment is just a beautiful dream world, or because the neighborhood is as you explained it to be. But I've never felt more comfortable in a place where I live. And it's so beautiful, right? It's wonderful. Like, I ride the L train, I love walking around. It's how we spend our time, walking around Fresh Pond Road, like all over the place. The kids, the families, the languages, the food, yada yada. But there does, like, I studied sociology in school, right? So I try to I'm not in school anymore, but I try to go back to that and think about, like, the real things that are happening. It's like, well, you know, I pay for what I think to be a nice penny for what I can afford now, right? But, like, who was there before me? And, like, I know the history of my building and how it wasn't, you know, uninhabited for years until our landlord kind of, like, redid it, right? But I try to think about the gentrification side of it, right? Like what families am I taking away from because of the income that I have and what I have and so on and so forth. And like, we talk about this stuff all the time at the house, and you know.
What street are you on?
We're on 70th and Forest, so right behind Myrtle.
Ah, by the
By the Carvel.
Carvel, ice cream.
Yeah, right, kind of like diagonal from it.
Ah, okay.
I don't know. It's just,
I'm at the Pizza Hut on Myrtle.
oh yeah,
Post
like,
office.
right by the post. Yep, yeah. Sorry, everybody.
Sorry.
But yeah, no, it's really fun to hear somebody else's enthusiasm about the neighborhood, because I feel the same exact way, but there's still this percentage of me that, I mean, that's why I'm here, right? To talk about this kind of stuff. But it's very exciting to hear somebody else's excitement about the neighborhood.
I have there's a facilitatory thing happening in my brain where I'm picking out themes, and I really liked her story about, it was sort of about the absence of barriers, right? And then there's all this grappling with barriers, and I wonder if people might have comments about any times they might have experienced barriers actually lowering in the places where they live.
Yeah, my wife and I lived in Fort Greene for 2 years, and it was a big on South Elliott Place by Brooklyn Tech High School, and the building was an old tenement style building, probably maybe 100 apartments or something, and I didn't know my neighbors at all, but not until like when we moved there, it was in kind of the late spring, early summer, and they had an amazing pig roast out in the street, organized by all the tenants, and I was like, this is kind of amazing. That wasn't happening in Williamsburg where I was at, and it was a really good time, and then we're able to get to know some of our neighbors over the next 2 years, and that doesn't always happen.
I could probably speak to this actually. I really love how in the Equality for Flatbush definition of gentrification, they talk about the stakes that different kinds of residents have, and how really like most of us here aren't like rich, right? Like, so that's, at the end of the day, when you look at the end result of gentrification, it's only like rich people at the end of the day, when everything looks like Midtown Manhattan, like probably most people here can't even go there, right? So that being said, it's like, well then what can we do, right? And I'm involved in some tenant organizing in my neighborhood, where we do of course, because Bushwick is very bilingual and stuff, but like different long-term residents have been coming with their landlord issues, and we've been working with some tenant advocates and folks that we know to try to work on that. And then also me, who's less of a long-term resident, I was also sharing some concerns I was having in my housing. So that's just something. And I like what you said about food and about culture and community, and throwing events, especially in the warm months, can be a way that people come together. And sometimes very interesting things can happen when that starts to happen. Just wanted to talk about that. Does anybody want to comment at all about anything?
Well, I really appreciated your what you were in your story, how you were talking about intentionality that you bring to your idea of, to your space around you and your neighbors, as a way of when you just on a daily, the everyday small things that you can actually do and bring, and whether that's a smile or just taking out your earphones. I just really, that resonates with me and what I try to do, and it's hard when when you live in a tough city to live in, to kind of not just be depleted as you're walking around, and kind of exude that, and really every chance that you can to be more open to those around you on the street is just, I think, yeah.
And one thing that struck me from a couple of the stories that were shared is that when I moved here to go to graduate school, so I moved to Williamsburg, and I didn't know what the prevailing rents were. I had no idea. I went to a real estate agent. They said this is what the rent is. You know, I didn't ask my neighbors. I didn't think to do any of these things. Like, what are people paying around me? You know, and of course, somebody might have an interest in getting a little bit more rent for the property owner or for commission. But over the years, I think that's something that I hear from a lot of students or transplants who come to New York is they're just sort of, they don't know, and it's not something that's taught in school so much. And so I do some work with a group called the Artist Studio Affordability Project, and one of the things that we're trying to put together is a bit of like a teach-in for art students, maybe as a starting point. Like if you're coming to New York or you just moved here for school, do you know what zoning is? Do you know what the rents are? Have you talk to your neighbors? And so creating those opportunities to actually talk to your neighbors and oh, you guys, you're in a rent stabilized building. This is what you're paying. That's fantastic. But a lot of transplants who come to the city they don't know that, and it's not something that's like taught or even encouraged, to be discussed. I feel, so that's one area that we're trying to address a little bit.
Your point, and then your point, like you're saying, you walk your dog, taking your earbuds out. To your point about just those little daily things we do that we now tend to do behind earbuds and life and busyness. And I feel like there's still something to be said for just old-fashioned everydayness and being in the moment for just everydayness. And
sorry.
I love that small town vibe, that like last night I was walking the dog down Fresh Pond Road and there was like this family, the little kids, and there's like a little contingent of Middle Eastern, like there's a whole little group of ladies with oh my God, their heads covered, and I don't know where they're refugees maybe from somewhere, and I'm just like, wow, they're safe, they're here, there's a place in the community for them, and the dog, I always let the dog go play, greet the kids, and the kids don't know whether they're going to get bitten or they want to pet the dog, and then I just love that small town feeling. Past the barber shop and wave to the barber, on your way to the train, and the bodegas and the ones that the Puerto Rican bodega and the Mexican bodega and the Polish bodega. I just love that sense of community. You don't get that anywhere else, so we can't lose that.
dogs and kids are good.
Dogs and kids.
Catalyst for that.
Dogs and kids.
It's funny. I've known you for many years. This is the first time I've been made conscious of your accent. Because, that's not something that I think about because I sound like I'm from here, I guess, right? Because I am in some way. So, I don't know, I'm thinking about, taking a move from Australia. I know your life, right? But, just thinking about, Bushwick as I know it and how other people maybe perceive that, hearing your voice, and the struggles that you spoke about of being misunderstood in certain ways, but you're speaking a language of English, right? So all of us here are speaking English. So that accent to another person who speaks English, and they're like, what? What are you saying? I don't know. That's just, it's crazy when you know someone for so many years and you just were like, oh, that's right, you do have an accent. Sorry.
Yeah, no. But it's that's one of the things that I've noticed in terms of barriers in our neighbourhood. Like I'm literally 6 blocks here, and in the few years that we've lived in Bushwick, more Airbnbs coming up, and so when I'm greeted, it's basically they think I'm a tourist. That's here with an Airbnb, but this is my neighbourhood, and had I not, which I learnt from you, take your AirPods out, be more aware, just to say hello, because I'm sure the old man that I've become friends with on my block, was saying hello to me more often, and I was just head down, oh, I don't want to say, are they being creepy, whatever, walk faster. But now we're friends, and he pets my dog. It's just, I don't know, and it's that sense of community, and now I feel like I do belong. No matter what time of night, I know that I'm safe on my street, And in my building, my neighbors are all lovely. It feels like we live in a house now, versus 4 different apartments. And it just takes a little bit of effort talking to the neighbors.
Yeah, I did think that Walker Percy was something with everydayness, but there is something about just, it doesn't have to be some big anthropological experiment. On some level, it can just be in the moment of everydayness of life and chatting and getting, you know, people you pass regularly, you get to know. And, I do feel, at least I feel Chelsea has that, but I guess for my own self, looking at, am I available for that everydayness, you know, like every day, am I too busy, do I have my headphones on, am I like too obsessed with the dogs sniffing too much and I'm trying to get to the office, and, you know, but just really committing to the simplicity of the everydayness of your neighborhood and engaging with it has a lot more power than we think.
That's probably good. It's about 7:40.
Well, you guys can refill your drinks since you're done.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for sharing so sincerely and nicely.
Or we could turn on music and drink.
Yeah, we could always just, yeah.
We can turn on that. It is kind of something. How many people here are going to be totally affected by that L train shutdown?
I hope my rent goes down.
Oh yeah.
Lower that.
Well, a year, it's not a year in January.
What's that?
January 2018.
No, they just changed it. What's the newest?
January 2018.
Is they're going to close it or they're going to reopen it?
I think they're still deciding that.
Yeah, because it was
Oh.
either
I think
3
it's
years
now.
of
They start
delayed
working.
service or 18 months of no service.
So the last update was January 2018. They start work, but
Wow.
that could
Oh,
change.
that's not for a long time.
Yeah.
But still.
No, it's not immediate.
No,
Okay.
it's a year from January, but not this summer, but next summer. The contract with the water taxis, they didn't get the $30 million subsidy, so the city has contracted with the San Francisco company that's going to do all these water taxis, so there'll be like twice as many water taxis next year.
Oh wow. Okay.
It's going all zigzagging the East River, zigzagging. It's just going to take off to like triple in amounts of ways to get around. They want these waterways to be just full of boats.
Interesting.
To get you around.
And busing as well.
Of course, there'll be tons of buses from across the bridges, and then ferries from Williamsburg across.
I'll take the ferry over the bus. I mean, I take the bus all the time, but the bus over Williamsburg Bridge.
You offer a beer after this?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and trying to strategize your commute. Yeah.
100%.
You don't have one at all by that time, so who knows?
So this is a funny little thing. My friend was visiting me in North Carolina for 10 days, and he was like, "Girl, you have to allow like an extra 30 days to get anywhere with you because you can't stop chit chat." and he's like, somebody had to pull their, I'll stop if people have earbuds and still talk. So we got into a debate over whether it was rude to make somebody take their earbuds out. Like, you know, were you imposing in their world, just if you see they have earbuds on and you start chatting with them anyway, and then they have to like take them out. And I was like, I never even thought about it. I was like, well, I mean, if they're there and you want to say something, like, they'll take them out or they won't say take them out. Most people take them out.
Yeah.
So I voted it was not rude.
I vote not rude.
Right?
Yeah.
But I realized, oh my God, like that's, if you like look at life as an extenuation of how we socialize and have etiquette. You know, like earbuds are a fact of life. So. Do you guys think it's rude when you make somebody take out their earbuds and chit chat with you?
I've kind of given up on earbuds. Everything's oriented now towards just the screen. Like,
That too. That too. Actually, I put those together in the same. Like if somebody's on their screen walking their dogs, many people are. Or their children. I still, I'll just chat with them. But is it rude? You wonder, Like, what's the extension of the etiquette around how people devise themselves?
I have to say, I had the most bizarre experience. I had to go get my driver's license renewed for various reasons in Sonoma, California. Which is like, if you don't know, it's one country, it's a little town. I went to the DMV, and it was an hour wait, and I was there with a bunch of other people. And no one was on their phone. And it was just bizarre. Because in New York, it's, there's 5 minutes, you're waiting in line at whatever. It's just, time to email, time to Facebook, time to whatever. And I was like, wow, you people are thinking your own thoughts. An hour. It's crazy.
He was saying the same thing about the whole seeing people talk. When they've got the earbuds in and talking.
Yeah.
Because I guess if your daily life isn't really urban, you don't experience that. You don't see people talking into their headphones.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm not saying you don't, but you don't live it daily as if it's nothing. He's like, do you ever feel like you're like just living with crazy people? Everybody's just like talking to themselves, and it looks like so normal. I never really thought about it.
Well, when Bluetooth first came out, I did think all the time that I was like, oh, okay, that's great. And then he turned his head and he had the little Bluetooth thing. Yeah. They're really chatting it up about gentrification.
But then that begs a question too about gentrification. Just hit me because we're talking about it as an urban issue, and that's there. But because I just spent 2 weeks in the South. Like, what is the version of gentrification like in suburbia? Like, are there cars? People they have another way of navigating gentrification.
It's very interesting that you bring that up because poverty is increasingly becoming a suburban problem because all these people who are being displaced from the city are being displaced to suburbs where property values are going down.
Right.
So, and there's way less social services out there, and like you said, you have to have a car, which a lot of lower income people don't have or don't have good cars.
Or when you see a lot more people walking like at night and stuff, I know they're always like, that's such a hazard, they're going to hit people.
Yeah, because like the infrastructure.
It's a form of gentrification, so it's not just an urban issue.
It was funny, 2 weeks ago we went to Germany and Jeff was doing a talk, kind of something similar about this, and a group of students, probably like my age, like 24, 25, he took a moment and he's like, wait, you guys are familiar with the term gentrification? And everybody was like, and like, I don't know if it was a language thing, but
it was in a fairly rural.
Yeah, it was in a rural part, but a university, right? So you would think, from my perspective, that people would at least know or be familiar. Nobody had a clue, and I don't know if it was so much the language breakdown or the experience itself. But if you think about it on a global level, how do we build?
I like that you don't know.
I think it's a friendly space.
All right, sorry, we were wrapped up in deep conversations. So, how where your story? I mean, I don't know. This can be a space to just really quickly, just kind of share any like learnings, I felt like I actually learned a lot out there. I learned about Mexico City and how artists from the States are moving there because they can't afford it. I mean, I learned a lot just sitting up there for a bit of time. But I don't know if anyone from our group wants to kind of share back, or from the other group. You don't have to, no pressure, but anything moves you.
What's an example of something that you learned that you didn't know before?
I mean, I was going to ask you, I forgot your first name.
Sergio.
Sergio. Very interesting to me because I never thought about, I mean, I've been in Mexico City a number of times, past 10 years, but never thinking that it would land as the #1 destination in the New York Times for people to move to, because it's affordable, right?
And it's happening a lot right after undergrad. If you're in debt, you have to. So there you can actually continue being an artist, and there's a lot of artisanal spaces, and the rent is cheap for Americans. Not that's why all the rents are going up.
So when we talk, obviously, we obviously understand how this is connected to global capital and capitalism. But when you said that, I had to think about. It just reoriented me, because you think about even artists who are struggling, or even conscious and liberal or progressive. They graduate, like you said, from undergrad. They have tons of loans, and the peso is so much weaker now than the dollar, and so people move. And then, like you were saying before, then the Mexican residents get displaced from their homes in Mexico City. So anyway, that was
that was I think something that was sort of not a totally common thread, but something that a few of us shared. That like if you're moving into a neighborhood, do you know what the rents are? Do you know what that means to kind of go there, and what might seem affordable to you may not be affordable at all to sort of anyone around you, or even just knowing what your neighbors are paying. So, and I'm not sure that young artists moving to Mexico City know that.
Yeah. Also, something that was interesting, I don't forget, that you shared around, like, you're from Bushwick, you live in Bushwick, and she was talking about making a documentary about her fight to, like, not move, and she is a homeowner, and there are a few other homeowners who are staunchly, like, fighting this, and I think this is the moment where it's like tenants and certain homeowners do actually have the same interest to fight like that capital that's coming in, so that's not going to serve anybody.
Sure. I mean, it's a documentary oral history project, so it's not about my story, it's more about my neighbors and my neighborhood story.
Yeah.
But kind of talking to artists and activists and folks who have been affected by it, and trying to like document stories to get people talking and activated to be involved. I think it's about the involvement. I mean, you can only talk about it so much, but then when people start pooling their resources together, it's more kind of like, okay, now we've got something.
Yeah.
We get these artists who are supposedly driving the rents up, but guess what? They're broke just as much as we are.
Yeah.
And we talk and see what we can pull together.
And I mentioned that Sarah is a great resource because, Mayday Space, which you've been there, and there's Techo, what is it? Yeah, so there's a group that's organizing local folks in Bushwick, and the resource sheet has tons of groups that I'm sure you all might be familiar with who are fighting these policies and fighting the rezoning. But we're gonna before we have more cheese or crackers or anything, we're gonna do a more truncated version of a mapping exercise, a drawing exercise. I don't know what happened to
They're right here.
Markers and great, cool. So if we can, we're gonna split up into groups of 3, and what we're gonna do is I'm not gonna actually tell you each prompt because that will spoil it. But the idea is that you guys are gonna basically sketch out. You're gonna have basically a very short. Usually this is done like in 3 hours. We're gonna do this in like rapid speed, and so I think it'll be better. I don't know. Are folks okay? Like kind of kneeling over or whatever. So we can do the groups of 3. Are there any like awesome artists, visual artists, fine artists here in the space? I know there are a lot. So we can do this as a group drawing thing, or we've done it also where there's 1 or 2 lead artists things are being, shouted out, and then they'll
skills to translate.
Yeah, exactly. So we can do a combo.
Any doodle masters? We got the doodle masters.
Any doodle masters? Yeah. So why don't we? Well, this is really long. people probably don't want to move too much, but
Very good.
One over there, and then one over here.
But I know Walsh's Club because she has family there.
Oh, hi.
When, like, Glen Falls.
and then I'll come around with tape. And I'm gonna take these out to the floor. So where's the marker?
They're right here. Oh, good. And then there's more over there.
Awesome. That was like the first
Okay, so everyone's got a bunch of markers. So we can have a group maybe out there. Where's the last group of? Is there a last? Are all the pieces of butcher paper? Oh, there's 3, right?
Yeah, let me find the other one while you're organizing.
This one? Here?
Oh
Yeah.
Okay, great. So are there any lethargic people who don't want to move? Because then they kind of cheat or effort? Are there any motivated people feeling like they can go here? And then we'll take it down. So if I can have a visual artist at each station, I don't know, Sarah, do you mind being in the middle? Sure. I don't know. Bill, would you mind being here? And I think it's always a lot funner when it's actually, wow, one piece is like so much longer than the other one. And you guys got stiff. I know, you guys got stiff. You want one?
That's fine.
Okay. And then you're, oh yeah, you have a really long one too. Okay. So basically, I was going to show you an example, but actually, it would actually ruin the fun of it. So this is called Imagining Housing Justice, and I borrowed this exercise, and I'm sure they borrowed it from someone else. It's the, what is it, School of Creative Activism? I think that's the name of it. The two, do people know what I'm talking about? The two, Steve Lambert. So is it the School of Creative Activism?
It's the Center
for Creative Activism.
Artistic activism.
Artistic activism. Oh my god, I get really confused. So it's a modified version of their activity. And basically it's a community mapping and thinking and drawing exercise. So the rules are you cannot write any words out, so no words, just pictures and symbols. So as much as you can avoid, if you have to, like if you're putting like, obviously like NYPD or NYCHA, right? NYCHA Housing, which is a New York City Housing Authority, you can do that. NYPD, you can do that. But not everything will be words. If you have to use words, that's fine. So the prompt is we're going to have 3 phases, and you're going to have 7 minutes for each section to draw, and then I will tell you to stop to pick up your markers, and then we'll move on to the next phase. So how we're going to do this, because we have interesting butcher papers, is we'll start on one. Okay, so on the left side, so you think of your piece of paper, and yours is a lot shorter. So if you need more, let me know.
Do we use all the butcher?
We have
Oh wait.
one more long piece of that.
Oh yeah, does anyone want to work over here? Or maybe we should have 2 groups.
Group 3.
That could be, we could take that piece next.
Yeah. Do you want? Should we just do 2 groups?
They could all connect into one picture.
Do we want? Are we feeling? Does anyone want to work on here as a separate group? Anyone feeling? Is there a third person who wants to draw or?
Jen can draw.
I will draw.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sorry. And also, like I said, you know, everyone can kind of pitch in as well. So maybe like 4 people can join, Jen.
How about
join
you 3 over there?
Is that cool?
You have Neon over there.
Okay, awesome. And then you guys are just chilling. Also join if you want. Okay, so the first prompt. So think of your piece of paper.
Okay.
Think of your piece of paper in 3 sections. Okay, you just invisible 3 lines, sort of equal to each other. Okay, so I mean like dividing basically the piece of paper into 3. So you're starting on the left-hand side, the first third, and what you're gonna do is, if you're the lead artist, you establish what method you're using. Is everyone's drawing, which is fine, or one, or. But basically, what you're gonna put down here in this third portion, 1/3 on the left side, is what are the state of housing conditions like right now in your neighborhood, or you could say New York City, but I prefer if you can speak more specifically about your neighborhood. And what we'll start to see is that these are patterns, right, that we see in every single neighborhood, whether you're in Chelsea or Bushwick or Harlem, but just do it in pictures. So it doesn't have to be just housing, right? And some of the last groups where we've done this exercise in the past, folks have actually put in the NYPD and cops that are present, because when we see cops, right, like the folks in East Harlem were like, we started to see cops. We started to see that they weren't there to protect us, they were there to protect the gentrifiers. And that's when the divisions became much more clear of like who they wanted to stay in the neighborhoods and who they wanted to displace. So some folks drew like cop cars and stop and frisk and things like that. So it doesn't have to be just housing, it could be stuff like small businesses maybe being disrupted or evicted, things like that. So I'm gonna basically time this for 7 minutes, this first section. So again, pictures that will articulate and represent what the current situation of housing is like right now, however you see it in your community, and you're gonna kind of represent it in pictures. So I am and any questions?
Oh wait, yes. So as the person who was volunteered to draw but wasn't really sure what I'm doing, we are working on this together, right?
Yeah, you are working. I'm sorry. Yeah, no.
And
if you want, I have thicker markers. If you want, I have my own some markers too. Are you good with those? If you need thicker ones, I have really thick. Yeah, these are my thick ones. Sorry. Yeah. So to clarify, I probably shouldn't give people. I probably shouldn't have given people an option because there's all artists here. If folks can get down, like stick figures are fine. Stick figures are totally acceptable.
Things don't have to be to scale.
I think the funnest part is when everyone pitches in, but obviously she's a professional artist, so.
But I still actually waiting.
So yeah, everybody.
We're supposed to picture the current state of our neighborhood. Yeah, housing and branching out into landscape from there. And I guess we have no thirds, so we've got like right-of-ways in there. Maybe? Okay.
So this is current reality of where we live. I live in Soho.
Some parts of dollar signs were we see it, it's like in the environment, they feel like really overgrown and not taken care of.
Oh my God.
I'm like, she's not.
So, like, think about houses, and some of them have like tons of like.
You're not gonna stick to the third, the left third.
Maybe some like fancy party size. Yeah.
What does that mean?
Do you want to start drawing? I mean, basically, we're just drawing. In this section is like what our neighborhood is. So this is like our current neighborhood. Right? Pages about it. So it could be like 3 houses, and each of them is treated totally differently. Just as simple as yeah. Let's see. When I think about my neighborhood, so I live in a little house. We bought it 13 years ago. But all my neighbors are material. So we start here's my little house. It looks like Astoria. It's East Williamsburg. It looks like Astoria. And then here are my neighbors. And it's just, they're just like enormous, but they're getting really big. And then you have like little balconies up there. And then actually we have like pine trees, but you guys should draw Yeah, so the front is all like darker. Oh, and there are some like really nice fences, fancy fences.
It's like 6 months, so there's no sense of neighborhood.
And like,
Something will open, and then before you blink, it's gone. The thing that kind of, like, see, like, when I was a kid, there was like, this local comic book store, there was a local grocery, there was like, there was a social club, different little spots that gave you a feeling of identity, like, you could go, you hang out, and like, man, what you guys doing? The one place that I was excited about actually was just like this cat cafe. I was so excited about it, but then it costs $11 an hour to sit with cats.
You guys have about 5 minutes. 5 minutes for this session.
You're doing a good job.
Need more markers?
Yeah, so it's not kids, but also the food and just
so Phil and Jen
is like, because also my mom
There's like a that more intellectual.
yeah, because
So
I always love how
it's like it's becoming
Here, let me take
the thing I noticed about the I don't know where you
I'm in Texas Davis, he's like,
you know, like, what is that?
He says, 4 p.m. there's all the I heard on Monday. So I'll just tell Paul, like, shoot it, because I don't need it. It's fast. Okay.
like the big trees.
Temporary walls, the rain about who can access it.
Yeah, the little window, that's gonna be good.
I don't, I guess they're in the office if they're not in the office. Because they should have been packed up with all the stuff that was going to come.
So I feel like what happens is things gentrify more, so then of course so much further out living on limited income. So then you get
Sort of overgrown.
So I'll just send them to the office tomorrow to see if there's.
Vegetables. I was gonna say. Some nice pale and there's a the GOE work is that's not GOE. DOB. That's true.
Like a lot of small businesses that are more central.
I'm going over. I was gonna draw the sign over here.
And the such being replaced by big banks and
They basically open the business district, so that's what.
I mean, there's some public housing like right on the river.
Wait, if you're gonna be in the office tomorrow, can you bring local ones to me?
In certain parts, there's not.
Okay, close to the office. You know, like they're in those little bags.
And then you can try other stuff.
They're on that like filing shelf at the end of where I sit.
So it's about 3 more minutes for this section.
So what else? Let's think more.
Again,
like,
the state
we can have more
of
than
the
one idea.
state of conditions in housing
What
right
else?
now.
I'd like to get all that stuff out of date.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, like, watermelon?
And I'd like to hear about.
Well, yeah, it can be whatever you like.
So I guess if we're thinking about what else in our neighborhood, like what else really
there's a lot of people that,
I mean, there's just so much expression from the
Like old stuff.
Okay. I just don't have.
updating and
Yeah. I
it's really hard to visualize noise, but I feel like that's part of it too. Like there's just like constant like bouncing and like
So it's a very champagne flutes.
I'm just like, but then I feel like there's like a product, then it's like
Another minute.
yeah. I'm very bad timer. It is a little bit like a thing.
Since it's not
the
first third. We're gonna say your first third, yeah, we're gonna
And my neighborhood takes a lot of different doors. Like, so everybody's old doors and somebody's house.
Right.
When you walk around, there's
so it should go to your phone, because then otherwise we'd have to do all this.
Kind of the cycle.
Oh yeah, I like these.
Like the very cheap,
Kind of 50s.
very simple places that just cater to like.
What neighborhood are you in?
And then those are your corporations.
newer ones, which are facing
Like the
medical
glass,
glass, which is just a community handle, right? In the midst of like all these, like you see the newer ones, kind of like to what's on
whatever.
I love
I think that even more than cards in all of our cities.
they're so fun. I love it. I want to do it. I'm so curious, like, what are the something about the you're recording as something that
You better hurry up because they're all gonna look like
I know you're right. Racial differences or
Racial,
right?
Betty was talking about, I think you're referencing you were talking about the separation between Chinese community and Sunset Park.
And then the Latino part of Sunset Park, yeah.
There's like a real sense of like barrier, and that's been exploited by the
Yeah,
real
it's being
estate.
exactly by the bankers and real estate. Like in this case, a lot of the Chinese banks who are starting to invest in
They
in
built a
Chinatown
skate
part
park
of Sunset Park.
like across from us.
There's just this.
This is
There's
totally
just this mentality of like we're gonna do it on our own, and especially the Chinatown.
I think some of the neighbors
getting touched by this just yet. It's actually happening. Like,
and I think some of the neighbors were like also they talking down the street together. It's just like but I totally like it. Like I feel like it's really nice. Maybe an hour. It's almost like
that in a way they, for at least for the local.
I saw some artists that managed to squeeze in a
yeah, exactly. Because they're gonna get pushed out, right? But then the bigger context is like what Chinese folks should really be doing in my community is like uniting folks who are getting hit hard, which is in the other, the other side. But they feel like it's not
property values go up.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's true. I mean, that feels like true for a lot of different neighborhoods where they're kind of that's like you know, like maybe something similar between Williamsburg and Greenpoint maybe at some point, and now they're totally, you know. I mean, some Polish families are able to stay in Greenpoint, but not many. Folks are, you know, unless they own their buildings. It's interesting. So we're gonna let me kind of like smack down.
So that was
So we're gonna move to the next section of our drawing. So if you can wrap up our last little piece, little image that you're drawing, and now you're gonna work on the complete opposite end of the paper. Leave the middle free. So if you can leave as much as the middle part free. And so on the right side, what you're gonna draw is the ideal society or the utopia that we would be living in. And the utopia, frankly, I don't know if all of you know each other, right? We're all kind of just forced into this group together, right? So we might all have different different views of what utopian society would look like with housing justice. I mean, it could look very different for everyone. But generally speaking, if we can, and of course I'm asking you to do this in 7 minutes, but represent that onto the paper. And so what that means, and not just in terms of housing, but what the society would look like in terms of, like someone mentioned in the story circle, a diversity, right? The diversity is withering away of our various communities and languages, and so what is the opposite of that? So you're basically drawing the opposite of what you, probably the opposite of whatever you drew on the left-hand side. So I'm gonna give you about 7 minutes, and you're really thinking pie in the sky, think really big, think really visionary. It could be out of this world, right? But so the idea is just to think maybe not even just 20 years from now, but like way out there. What would it look like in pictures?
Like,
And I'm
we
gonna
could
start
have
the
any city, like what would equitable housing, what would like view of
The occasion.
say
I'm trying to think of
thriving
videos that you see on
communities that
YouTube.
were like stable, or I don't know, is it the best thing?
Recently, and I was in a neighborhood called, I was in Trondheim, and there was this one area that I went to, and it was an area of
there's space
where a lot of artists were, and it was an area that was going to be, that was like going to be gentrified, but people fought back and organized to protect it. And it was just a really inspiring area because there was such a sense of community.
So are we doing
There was a lot of community garden spaces. For me, there would be a lot of community garden spaces.
But I think it should be, but not just like a square, like it should like line through.
Food access,
Right, so there's like a, well, this is popular. So there's like a park, but it's like a,
citywide composting.
like a, not an organic shape, it's not like a.
It started, there's little pockets of it, but it's, this was like, I literally like seen people came and picked up my house every day.
You know that ride?
Service.
And actually, you know, I know, in our city, so Boston, you know, that has a negative one.
So I think
others just to bring it, I think, but like Boston have that little spark that like kind of sticks through it. So I'm sort of picturing this, I don't know Boston all that well. It's not the Charles, it's not that. There's actually like a part that it feels like you pass it and you pass it again.
And like all the way down like a block, so.
I mean, that doesn't matter, like, in certain places I've heard struggles were changed, where actually there was laws that had changed.
Yes, right, in time, it's always been this way.
Yeah, it was weird.
No, I haven't.
It was interesting that they would go away, all the restaurants and cafes and community spaces.
Very like different age, no ego
And also places that are integrated. For example, I found a place for moms to go. So like, you know, she goes to the senior center in the village, so hang out like
Or solar panels.
So when she goes there, it's just people her age, like there's just a sense of intergenerational experience. I mean, it's an art space, so it's like, you know, just like in these integrated spaces,
I just saw that.
There's so much
having the best world right now.
Then
like
that
having
social
next
network.
step so everyone can see the talk.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know how to like intergenerational interaction
They're higher up.
in like these multidisciplinary gathering spaces.
Right, so it's lower range than not just,
Then it comes to our stadium.
right.
So,
There's
I have it's been so you have
Yeah, I need
I do.
Wi-Fi.
And you probably have that problem too, because if you don't graduate, especially if you get studios.
younger people
That's like
unheard
unheard of.
And it doesn't support families.
That's so not right. Sit down tuition. It's not like, oh, I can't. If I had done my research better, I probably would have not.
If this is really utopia, it's
It's like a
for
for sure.
That's right. Well, yeah. No money.
The elderly, the parents.
How are you guys doing? We have like about 2 more minutes until we get to
Wait, I mean, remember.
I love it. We have windmills that birds love. Wow. Very cool.
And then I have the
So yeah, we did like, it didn't really build a lot of housing. And are you talking about?
Oh, you know what?
Are we
Yeah, you want to see the visionary.
You're
21st century.
You sound like you have an idea.
I don't exactly know, but I'm just trying to think of, I'm just trying to think like what it. Sounds good. Let's get some geodesic going.
It kind of looks like more like a donut, but.
Working with, ways that you can easily grow food, so the building is a living building, so.
Like a
Vertical
green
farming.
Vertical
It's growing its own
farming.
energy.
Green solar power, green roofing.
And mixed use, so what is part of?
Oh yeah, we don't have any, like,
Which part of the shared jobs, shared library, shared function? Yeah, shared entertainment, theaters, and art galleries, and art studios, so they're very open, very open kitchens for cooks and chefs.
Yeah, maybe it's not even maybe
Okay.
squares and rectangles. Maybe it's like it's
Hands
more like
down,
housing
please.
that's surrounding us in the center or something.
Okay, this last
Right, so work.
guys, so we have this last section, and we have a little less time because I want time for report back or for a gallery walk. So this last section, so if you guys have a middle section left over, that's where you're gonna put it. In other cases, it might just be on top wherever there's blank space. But right now, what you're gonna talk about and visualize on paper here is how would you imagine getting from point A to point B? And so this is where everyone gets stuck, and of course this is where we'll have 5 minutes. But it's interesting when I've done this with artists in the room and then organizers are like literally drawing like petitions and bill signings and stuff, right? Like kind of that change. But however you think that can happen. And it doesn't have to be practical, right? Like probably we would need a revolution for this connected city. I'm not sure if this is like this connected, like utopian city to happen. So, but just connecting where where the objective housing conditions, poor housing conditions, or lack of affordability, to the utopia. So, what are the steps to get there? Or would it be like maybe baby steps like conversations, or would it be taking over city council, or getting certain elected officials to be in office that are accountable, or bills, whatever it is, however you want to represent that, you're just going to try to connect these two areas here. And I'll give you about 5 minutes, starting now.
You guys, the way that we can get from here to here is nuclear war.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I feel like we just but there's no people to man the co-op, which is really weird.
Do you want me to throw people, but
one person. As a person who survived the apocalypse.
or a common problem,
But we still have Wi-Fi.
something more
He
fun.
still has
like
Wi-Fi.
It's leftover after the apocalypse.
something
Okay, but
creative or
I guess-
or it could even be a green
I guess
space,
assuming that
whatever.
this world does actually
To get people,
Do we need to see a protest?
doing something that isn't related to specifically to the problem. And then having them bond.
Maybe this is on a different planet.
And then
Yeah, we took a ride.
There's like a elixir that everybody on Earth takes a little drink of, and it makes us start fresh.
And this will
But
be
you can think about like
Maze, whatever.
Think about like
Kind of
the
that's
idea
just gonna
that
bond
like
people
how would it
regardless
talk, how would it be not just get from that landscape to this landscape, but get from our capitalist sucking how would we get to the point where like we were valuing people and everyone was trying to make
As a
money?
start.
Yes, right, everyone was driving themselves insane, trying to get more money.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah, I know
trying
some
to
people
destroy
draw,
like,
like,
how would
you
get
know,
in you, how would we change that culturally as much as we learn from this, like why
Or it can be, if you're thinking more like continuously looking at even more like
No money. Or at least the idea of how we consider money to be like you mentioned a conversation like that one thing like that was real. Like you have chickens, I live right by the water. Give me somewhere and I'll give you some water.
Yeah.
Like that's how it was.
Experiencing together.
So like I don't think we gotta go back in time. Like
sleep.
So,
I mean, if I didn't, we could draw something right here.
Sure.
do that.
Currently.
You need what?
Okay.
Right,
It was just.
Part of it was educating, right? Educating each other. Education. So
So that's a good idea. Why don't we build like why don't we draw like a school and we put that money sign on top of it where it's like a school but nobody has to pay to go and it can go whenever you want.
So that we.
Yeah, you can go whenever you want, like if you're ready for it. Take as many classes as you want at a time. It doesn't cost you anything. All your supplies are there. And you just show up when you can show up. And like kind of, it's not structured like our school system is now. Like, you know, September through May, you gotta go.
Wow, that sounds really deep. I was
I
like,
just
whoa,
swore,
what is
I
this?
just said,
It's like
but everything does start from consciousness.
directly or indirectly. Because you have a family, like you have kids, like it's a pay for stuff.
No, I love this though. It's like whatever it is, you know? If people are talking, it's the process too, as much as whatever's on paper.
So you're drawing a
So it's intimidating. It feels, because it's like, it's like the chicken egg thing, like shift in
Education that doesn't cost
consciousness,
anything in
but
terms
that shift
of
in
time.
consciousness. Because I see certain people, I see about, I see things like meditation becoming more popular, with these things, but then they're very quickly co-opted and they become very commercialized, and become very capitalistic very quickly. You know what I mean? And so it becomes more about personal abundance.
So you guys have about a minute and a half, and then we're gonna share,
it kind
like,
of sometimes
the
cannot
fire.
be aware of, like, I don't know. I mean, it's just tricky. Like, it seems like there's so many levels. There's consciousness, there's protest, there's systemic change within law, there's,
Your question that you posed was how do you
there has to be a fusing of all those things. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, to get here, we're truly all sharing, and we're not trying to screw each other out and be corrupt.
Yeah, my dad taking me to protests around, housing rights as a kid. I remember like being outside and being a kid and watching those signs and realizing that the reason that rent stabilization even still exists is because people fought for it all the way, and it's challenged over 2 years. And there's people who advocate and organize, and there's all these unseen forces that keep these limited protections in place.
Have about 1 more minute, just wrap up your last thought or drawing or pig.
I think we need to fundamentally away from capitalism. I don't think this is possible in a capitalist structure.
We don't have the last part totally fine.
Sustain capitalist demands growth.
I say capitalism is inherently, it is inherently unjust. It requires injustice to
Very deep conversation.
So maybe shifting from here to love.
Okay, guys. I hate to stop, but there's some really interesting conversations happening.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about some protests here.
Okay, guys, so this is amazing. So there seems to be a lot of I always have, there's categories when we do this. There's the doers who just want to draw, and then there's the doers, and then there's the intellectualizing, like the intellect just kind of destabilizes you. But in this case, there was a combo of both. Like there were some really interesting conversations I heard and some drawing, so that's always interesting. But this activity is just really a great activity where you have, I've done it where there's like housing experts and lawyers along with just like residents coming together. So it really levels the playing field because everyone has to talk and figure out what they're going to put on paper, which is always interesting what people come up with. But in the interest of time, I don't know if there's one person or the group wants to report back. And the way we report back, and then if you want to, you can kind of stand by the. Maybe what we'll do is, do folks feel like we can shift from one group to another as we close?
Oh, yeah.
And what we're going to have is each group that works on their drawing describe how we get, so describing basically the current conditions. This is beautiful. The current conditions, and then the ideal picture of housing justice. And then how you imagine us getting there, and some of what can be brought out in your report back is the stuff that you maybe discussed and didn't think, which is always interesting. So I don't know who here wants to.
Well, we can probably talk about it. I mean, I think we were trying to kind of. It started with the notion that it feels like the current housing situation right now. We still have a 3-family home right next to a big condo, and that Jen and I actually found photos of situations like this where it's like a huge building project right next to somebody's.
And then over it.
Yeah, over it. Like that one actually built over it. And that, there's smaller businesses are closing, there's this kind of corporate entities like Starbucks moving into the neighborhoods, and that there's still a lot of character, in the neighborhoods, but, tall is coming, and it's luxury and kind of private development. And that, when we started thinking about what was missing, we were like, where's the library, where are the community services, where are, where do you get to see people interact, and where's, so we tried to put some of that in there, rooftop gardens, I don't know, what the utopian part looked like. I think Sergio said, if we could just take the for sale sign off some of this, it would be wonderful, right? Like, what's existing is not terrible, it's actually quite wonderful, but there's, a lot of other interests coming into it. How we get to the things that were sort of missing in the other one, it was about, interaction, communication, talking, and kind of sharing ideas.
Community is pretty important.
But then how to represent all those invisible political interests and things, we definitely did not, draw de Blasio flying in jetpack or something. So I think we have some work to do, in this in terms of, how we kind of push back against some of the things that we see coming into our already existing world.
Cool. Are there any questions? This is really comprehensive for like 25 minutes. Cool. So maybe we can mosey on over here.
I guess the only comment I would make about that is just thinking about those community services spaces is like those are non-commercial ventures, and so they require within a capitalist system subsidy. They require investment, And there was a time where there was in New York the ability to buy buildings for $1 for cultural organizations to put down roots, and I just that doesn't seem like that's those same policies are in place in the same way that they were in the 60s and 70s. And just thinking about that, it's much harder for these new kind of community spaces to put down roots, you know, and like if some of those vacant buildings could be gifted to organizations that have a track record, or you know, or multiple organizations. I mean, it just could there could be a whole other thing.
Yeah, I mean the only example, or maybe you guys can think of one that I can think of, is the Mutual Arts, the Cooper Square Community Land Trust, which is the only community land trust I know of that's in New York City, where you know all these cultural institutions and nonprofits get to stay there at like below market
Is it
rate.
the 4th Street Arts Block?
Yeah, that's that building. Yeah, that whole building's got like
like ABC no Rio.
OBC no Rio is another
I mean,
one.
when I lived in England, I ran a building actually, and it was a community art space, and it was heartbreaking because I'm from New York, and I was in England, but you know, this was a very progressive space, but it could only be that because we were subsidized, and so you know, if we were having to operate in a climate like New York, it would disappear in a year, you know.
Yeah. Cool. So who wants to report back on this in the same fashion, just walking through the drawing?
I suppose I should. So, you know, it's a kind of abstract symbol-based thing that we have going on.
Should we turn it around? You want to turn it around? Or?
Is that what people?
Or people?
We're good. So the first thing that came in when we were looking at a lot of the neighborhoods that people in the group currently live in is there's a funnel of money just kind of shooting right into the neighborhood, and because of that, you're seeing, you know, very expensive developments. You know, even the food, there's like, even though there's so much like gourmet organic food, like especially one of our group members is in Chelsea, where in Chelsea it's super rich, but there's a project. So if you live in the projects, there isn't really affordable food, you know, to buy, right? Despite all this amazing food everywhere. And the lack of social services, as was mentioned, I was starting to draw like an old person sitting by themselves next to like a crater, where a social service should be. And I also I didn't even really verbalize this, but I did these little catwalks from one expensive building or place to the next. So it's sort of like the people that patronize that, they never really set foot on the ground. They're kind of floating above it. And I did a rat wheel with the money signs. And then the way I did lack of diversity was command copy, command paste. And then this was also lack of diversity. And then the segregation was symbolized by the different color faces being strictly segregated. So yeah, that was kind of a short synopsis of the current situation. Then we had on this side, this was like it was a very beautiful conversation where people were really talking about interdependence, which is kind of what this represents. It's like a web, and people really talked about different ages and every aspect of identity being interdependent, because that's something you don't see a lot. Especially the age came up a lot, so you see different sizes of people. And then the food was a big thing, and this idea of, you know, more community gardens and, you know, like apparently in England there's compost is like a city service, so like compost, there was a Buckminster Fuller inspired geodesic dome that came in. Oh, no chain stores, that's what this is, no chain stores. And buildings with gardens like on the buildings, and cool like eco buildings, and yeah, just a sense of and people said, you know, there's still money, but how is the money flowing, right? So instead of here, you just saw the money's kind of like going in one way, and then and people also said that it circles back into the corporate coffers. It doesn't go into the roots, but here the wealth is going, it's flowing between people, and it's creating like a web that everybody has a place in that's good for them. So, yeah. Oh, and then this. And then
We just have a few minutes, so we're gonna do maybe 1 minute on this, and then this is last group.
Okay, yeah, let me talk faster.
Sorry. And if anyone wants to.
Yeah, no, it's all good. This was very simple things. This was about conversation amongst different types of people, and then that can lead to like insight, and that's like a step. Listening, fighting, power, shifting gears. The Smashing Capitalism. And Sankofa, which is a bird that is looking backwards and that symbolizes learning history so that you can move forward with more knowledge. So.
Wow, that's beautiful. You got all that in 25 minutes? Damn. Good job. All right, and then the last group, last but not least. That was, yeah.
Yes.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, so there was 4 of us, so we all kind of just drew our individual thing. What was her name? Jen. Jen spoke about how she lives in this little house here. And it's nice, they have a little tree, and, like a big fence, and it's cute. You've been there in East Williamsburg for a while, right? But over the years, big tall buildings have come and they cast like a lot of shade on her little house in there, so she doesn't get to see the sun too much. But her neighbors are nice, she said. And this is a jackhammer because there's always construction happening in all of our neighborhoods.
Yes.
And then Renee spoke a lot about the food, which is kind of cool to have the other group before us spoke about that too. How like a couple of years ago, it was kind of just not like the top cut of beef and stuff, or like no really organic stuff, and just kind of like you could tell that it was processed to the extreme and cheap and affordable, which is cool, right? But now that different types of people are moving in, they're coming up with more expensive, different types of food, more options, right? Which on the surface is great, but who's it affecting and who can afford and who can't?
Yeah.
Doug spoke a lot about the construction that's happening in his neighborhood in Bushwick too, and how like every other apartment building that you see, they have like that typical format, right? But they're all newer and nicer on the outside, but what's happening on the inside? In Ridgewood, there's a bunch of different types of doors that I really like. And I drew those there, but then you see like the old kind of doors with different types of windows, and every once in a while you see like these big new glass ones that are being redone too. And then this is what I did about how some houses you see on the outside, they're like really nice with like little flowers and trees, and it's all like prim and proper. It looks like it's out of some kind of home magazine. And there are other houses where the house is just the same, but it's all overgrown. So like when you're walking through what you're seeing and what that impact is on the inside, right? And then this little weird utopia, there's only one person. No, that's silly. But we drew a park that goes through the whole neighborhood. Very green. This isn't Wi-Fi. This is housing. This is housing that when you're close to the park, it's like low. And then as you get further away, blocks away, the houses go higher, so there's like no obstruction behind you. I really like that. Lots of windmills, and our windmills are bird friendly. There's no money. People have bikes. There's one of those little dome houses that people like. And it was really hard for us to try. There's water. Yes. And clean.
A windmill, so that's like sustainability.
Yeah. Sustainability. It was kind of hard for us to get there. We drew a couple of things. We drew free school for everyone.
Nice. Yes.
And it was like we whenever started with barter.
Oh, the barter system. Oh,
Barter
cool.
system, yeah. So this is a water jug and that's a broccoli. So if you live by the water, like down here, and somebody else who's over here can trade your broccoli.
Awesome. That is awesome.
For them, yeah, that last part was kind of tough.
Yeah, it was hard. It's
free education. We
were like, to get from here to there, especially if there were no people here, you could just have a nuclear bomb in the middle and wait like, I don't know, a few thousand years, and then maybe you would get there.
Oh my gosh. So thank you so much. We have to close. I know we're a little over, and thank you so much. These are like,
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this is great because it's just the process of having conversations, and it's really more about your own experience versus actually than what's really on this paper actually. Thank you so much for participating. I always do a closing circle, but since we have no time, can we just say one word of a takeaway from today, maybe just from anything, everything, what you heard, the story circle, the drawing exercise, one takeaway, and then we'll just close that way, and hopefully we all can stay in touch in some way.